Most of the calories that keep you alive today are controlled by a handful of corporations. They've spent a century training us to believe that food only comes from the soil, and only if you buy their seeds, their fertilizers, and their land. This belief is the foundation of our dependence. We have been conditioned to accept that survival is a product of backbreaking labor and industrial inputs. But what if I told you there is a plant that defies the gravity of modern agriculture? A crop that doesn't hide in the dirt, but hangs in the air. A plant so aggressive it can grow 8 inches in a single day, producing more starch per acre than the finest Idaho potato, with zero human intervention. This is not a dream of the future, it is a ghost from our past. In 1905, the USDA received a sample of this air potato. Within decades, it was labeled a noxious weed. It was banned. It was hunted. Today, it is a crime to even possess it in some states. They tell you it's for the environment. But the archive tells a different story. They didn't ban the air potato because it was a weed. They banned it because it makes you unmanageable. It is a plant that provides total food security for free, and in a world built on debt, free is the most dangerous word there is. This is Dioscorea bulbifera. Its story begins in the ancient forest gardens of Africa and Asia. For millennia, it was the emergency reserve of humanity. When war or famine destroyed the grain fields, the people looked up. The air potato was there, hanging from the canopy, out of reach of grazing cattle and hidden from the sight of moving armies. It was the ultimate sovereignty crop. Think about the strategic brilliance of this plant. A traditional potato requires a field. A field is visible from the air. A field can be taxed. A field can be salted. But a vine that weaves itself into the existing forest is invisible. To the untrained eye, it is just greenery. To the sovereign family, it is a vertical pantry that no one can find. It arrived in the Americas on slave ships, not as a commodity, but as a lifeline. The captives knew that if they could plant a single bulbul in the corner of a wilderness, they would never truly starve, no matter how much the system tried to strip them of their agency. In the 1700s, Maroons, escaped captives who built independent societies, used the air potato to sustain themselves for decades while under constant siege. It was the fuel of their resistance. By the early 20th century, the industrial food system began to solidify. They needed crops that were predictable, crops that required tractors, pesticides, and, most importantly, permission. The air potato was the opposite. It was wild. It was free. If a plant can feed a family without a tractor, that plant is an enemy of the industrial state. Why is it more efficient than the potato you know? Because a regular potato is a sink. It spends all its energy pushing into the heavy, resistant earth. It has to fight soil compaction and ground-dwelling pests just to exist. The air potato is a climber. It uses the trees as its bones. It harvests sunlight at the top of the canopy, where the light is purest, and sends that massive energy back down into the bulbils, the aerial tubers. A single vine can produce over 200 potatoes in one season. You don't need a shovel. You don't need to break your back. You just wait for them to fall. While a modern farmer battles blight and drought, the air potato thrives in the heat, the rain, and the shade. It is unkillable. And in the eyes of an industry built on selling you vulnerable plants, that makes it a threat to the bottom line. But here's where the story gets dark. If you search for the air potato today, you will see a wall of warnings. Toxic. Invasive. Poisonous. The propaganda is so thick it has almost entirely buried the truth. And they aren't entirely lying. That is the brilliance of the suppression. The wild, unselected air potato contains diasgenin, a potent compound used by Big Pharma to synthesize hormones. If you eat the wrong variety raw, it will make you violently ill. This was the perfect kill switch for the knowledge. By flooding the landscape with toxic, wild varieties and banning the edible ones, the system ensured that no one would ever dare to harvest it. They turned a lifeline into a legend of fear. But the forgotten roots remain. In rural Asia and Africa, the cultivated varieties, the ones with smooth skin and sweet flesh, are still grown. They are boiled, mashed, and baked exactly like a potato. The secret isn't that the species is poisonous. The secret is that the world's most resilient food source was replaced by a version designed to keep you afraid of your own surroundings. To reclaim this sovereignty, you must look for the edible cultivar. Not the invasive weed, but the heirloom varieties kept by the true stewards of the land. First, identification. This is the barrier to entry. The edible variety has smooth, tan skin, often shaped like a teardrop. The toxic variety is often gray, bumpy, or warty. The leaves of the edible varieties are broad and heart-shaped, with veins that radiate from a single point. Learning to see the difference is the first step in breaking the dependency. Second, the trellis. Most modern crops require cleared land. This is a colonial concept. The air potato thrives in the edges. It needs vertical space. A single 10-foot pole, or an existing oak tree, can support enough vines to feed a family for a month. It creates a 3D garden, utilizing the space that industrial agriculture ignores. Third, the harvest cycle. You don't dig. You collect. When the leaves turn yellow in the fall, the calories literally drop into your hand. These bulbils have a shelf life that puts modern produce to shame. They can sit on a cool shelf for 6 months without rotting. They are a living storage system that requires no refrigeration. Think about the implications of a crop that requires no tilling, no weeding, and no digging to harvest. It is the ultimate lazy food, but in our culture, we have been taught that if you aren't suffering for your food, you are doing something wrong. We have been sold the theology of hard work to justify a system of hard profits. The weed is only a weed to the man who wants to sell you the grass. The air potato was erased because it was too easy. It was too free. It provided a starch that the tax man couldn't count and a security that the grocery store couldn't threaten. In a world where supply chains are becoming more fragile by the day, these ancient blueprints aren't just a curiosity, they are a survival strategy. They represent a time when humans were part of an ecosystem, not just consumers in a system. We are building an archive of these lost blueprints. Not just for gardening, but for a life that doesn't ask for permission. We are unearthing the techniques for free power, the science of ancient medicine, and the architecture of permanent shelter. If you are ready to look up instead of down, subscribe. Reclaim the wisdom they couldn't bury. Rebuild the legacy of the unkillable. The archive is open. The harvest begins now.